This is about the chemical bonding creative project. So this is I've talked about this before in class, but in case you're an online student, I want to make sure everybody is on the same page. This is worth 20 points as an assessment, as a test, 20-point test. It doesn't sound like a lot, but we do mostly just smaller quizzes here, so this is actually worth a decent amount of your grade. So let's talk about what this is. So this is you have several options for this creative project about chemical bonds. The chemical bonds I'm talking about, of course, are ionic bonds, metallic bonds, and covalent bonds, and those covalent bonds can be broken down into polar covalent bonds and non-polar covalent bonds. And I'll talk about where to find this information if you don't already have it in your notebook. So it says, excuse me, I have a cough. If you prefer to work alone, you have 5 options. I'll go over those 5 options with you. If you choose to work with someone else, which usually doesn't happen actually, you have 2 other options. There is no group option where you have more than 2 people working together. So let's take a look at the options for working alone. So for working alone, we're looking at instructional video or screencast. I've had a couple of students do this, and this has worked out well. If you want to do this, please contact me. I have a list of instructions on how to get to, like how to access the screen recording function for your iPad. So please let me know. I'll definitely send you the instructions. It's easy to follow. The instructions are. It tells you exactly what to do. You can set this up. It's pretty quick, and then you do it right there on your iPad. You can draw and you can do all kinds of stuff that you want to do to make your point. You probably should set up some type of presentation ahead of time so that you can talk over the presentation as you're explaining things, and that would be the screencast or the instructional video. Okay, I'm going to go over, like some people are asking, of course, like what do I need to have on my instructional video or screencast? I'm going to go over a rubric after all of this that tells you like what information you should have and what points you get deducted if you don't have it. So I'll go over that later on. The next one, number 2, is a shoebox diorama. I actually have a picture here of one of the recent ones that was done last year or the year before. You can see that ionic, metallic, and 2 covalent types of bonds are represented here visually and and obviously have been written about. So we take a look at that's polar covalent, non-polar covalent. This is just covalent, the sharing of electrons. And then of course you have here the ionic and the metallic bondings, and then you have them clearly labeled down here as pictures. These are all good things. So it says this option is for the student who is artistically inclined. Previous examples of these have been very, very well done. This is, I would say, above average example, the one I have a picture of. Just make sure that you have all the information you need on the 3 bonds and examples, and then whatever else that there is to do is up to you. Moving on, create a test. This one, lots of students choose create a test because they think it's going to be the easiest, and then they get into like question 10 and they realize it's not nearly as easy as they think it is. The test must have at least 20 questions. You may have no more than, here are the stipulations, here's the restraints. No more than 10 multiple choice questions, no more than 5 matching questions, no more than 10 fill in the blank questions, and no more than 5 free response questions. Free response being the one that you have to write like a couple sentences to answer. You may not use true and false questions at all. No true and false questions, they're way too easy, it's not worth it. Each question must have one clear-cut answer, which is harder than you think. In other words, like to create a good question that only has one answer, it's not as easy as you think it is, because lots of students will say things that will ask a question and there's multiple answers that you could have. Like, what do we call a chemical bond in this compound? And that compound has more than one type of chemical bond in it. That can happen. So, like if you're asking a question like that, then you would have more than one correct answer, which makes the question a lot more difficult and tougher to answer correctly. So you must have questions about each of the types of bonds. Obviously, if it's 20 questions, like if you had 21 questions, you would have 7 questions of each. Like there should be multiple questions of each type of bond. Some students have used Google Survey as a format. That seems to work pretty well because they just type the question in Google Survey and type in the answer, and then like it does the whole format for you. Moving on to detailed flowchart. I have a picture of a flowchart here. Ben Davila from a number of years ago, a couple years ago, did this, what I think is, again, above average. Now remember what a flowchart is. A flowchart starts with one thing. This one starts with a compound, and then you kind of ask yes or no questions, and that leads you to figure out what type of bond the compound has. Like, notice that he's got all the information. Ionic bonding is a linkage formed, negative difference between electronegativity. He goes through and explains all the stuff. This may be, better than average. Because he does have a lot of information on here, and he has it organized fairly well. So that's what a flow chart looks like. If you're doing this, it should be on a large piece of paper. We should be able to see it. Okay? All right, let's keep moving on. Make a pamphlet or a brochure. This is the most popular. Students think this is the easiest, and it might be the easiest, and that's fine. So when you have a piece of paper, it'll look like this. And this one doesn't need to be, of course, like on a large piece of paper. This can be just like a regular paper. You fold it into three like this. If you use Pages, there's actually a brochure format or a template that lets you like fill in the parts. So you have to flip, like you would have to like fold these over like this, and then you would have like something that looks like this, and this would be your title page and stuff. And then when you open it up, there's one fold like this, and there's the rest of it. And then you would have something over here, like maybe ionic bonding and metallic bonding or whatever. But you can do this any way you want to, but make sure that you have each type of bond clearly labeled. Make sure you explain what those bonds are using electronegativity and other like keywords. I'll get into those keywords in a little bit. And make sure that you have some form of an example. So that you have some kind of picture of an example of the bonds, so that people can see them visually along with just the words. Okay, and I'll go over the rubric then with you guys. Working with a partner, you can do a presentation for the class. I've only had 2 of these ever go really well. The 2 students that did this, the last time we did it they did a phenomenal job because they were both very organized and had run through this several times. So by the time they came in and gave the presentation to the class, it was really well practiced. Then they handed out a worksheet for the students to work on, and I had another class, students from another class do a quick quiz after they taught the topics of the 3 bonds. And the quick quiz was cool because then we gave them a quiz grade then. So they got like a 7 or 8 point quiz grade because of the quiz after these students gave their little teaching thing. So, or a homemade ed puzzle. You guys know what an ed puzzle is. You watch them all the time. 5.1, 5.2, they're all ed puzzles. So you know that like after giving a screencast, then you have questions then to quiz you as to whether or not you're understanding what's happening in the screencast. So that's what an ed puzzle is. It's just a screencast with questions. Throughout the screencast. I can show you how to do that. I'm not sure if the Edpuzzle, like if you can make an Edpuzzle video on the Edpuzzle app on the iPad. I'm not sure if you can or not, but I can help you do that because you can do it on my computer. So I'm going to move on here. I'm going to show you. Now this is where we get to how do I actually grade this? Well, this is a type 3, so we have 3 types. We have 3 FCAs. So the first one is include 3 types of bonds with supporting details. Supporting details, okay? That means a definition of an explanation as to what the 3 bonds are. Use the terms electronegativity, polarity, or when discussing bond type, you have to use some of the language that we've been talking about in class. Use data from specific chemical compounds to show differences you are highlighting. I'm just going to say, like, please use examples. That's what this is talking about. Must use some kind of examples, and they should be visual by nature, okay, so that you can see what's going on. Students don't always learn the best when they're just reading something. They also need like visual cues. So if you do 3 bonds and you have good supporting details, then you get a 10 out of 10 for that part of the FCA. Use the terms electronegativity and polarity. If you do that correctly as you're explaining, okay, you get a 5 out of 5. And if you show a very nice example and it's very clear as to what is going on in the bond, then you get a 5 out of 5, meaning a total of 20 points for an assessment. Please let me know if you have any questions. I think I went through those pretty thoroughly. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you want to know, like, the information, where do you get the information from? Ed Puzzle 5.1 has the 3 bonds, ionic, covalent, and metallic. And 5.2 then goes into nonpolar covalent and polar covalent. Okay, so that's where you're going to get the information for this. The Ed Puzzles 5.1 and 5.2. Now there's other information in the Ed Puzzle 5.1 where it talks about barf, breaking bonds, absorbing energy, and so on. But within those Ed Puzzles, you will find the information you need to do this creative bond project. All right, good luck, and let me know if you have any questions.